welcome to the 437th episode of the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and your co-host,
Kevin Toffel.
And we have the last episode of the Internet of Things podcast right here for you. And Kevin really wants to call it, what do you want to call it, Kevin?
Episode 500. It just feels nice to finish on a good high round number.
It really does. And you know what? Maybe if we consider the podcast we did before we created our own from GigaOM, we might get there.
That's true.
We have been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
All right. It's episode 437 and or 500 of the Internet of Things podcast. And this is really just, what is it when you I don't know, a swan song? We could be talking about all this news. Like this week, ARM has filed for their IPO. That's worth noting. Brilliant, which is a company that makes a light switch that also has a screen that you can use to control lots of smart devices in your house. They just launched a $400 smart display kind of thing that you don't have to wire in, but you still can control all your smart stuff. Leviton has an outdoor Matter switch and some new smart breakers that I'm kind of keen on since we've been talking about energy. But we're not going to talk about any of that.
Nope.
You have to go other places, and we'll talk about where we're going to send you once we're gone, because we're getting that question a lot. But first, I thought we'd just talk about why we're leaving and where we're going.
We sort of did, but there's a little more to the story. We weren't very specific.
Yeah, and now we can say where we're going. And I wrote about it in the newsletter. So most of y'all have gotten a lot of people. So basically, I wrote that I'm a little burnt out. I've been covering this space for 10 years, and I feel like, even last episode, we talked about how it really hasn't moved forward. And I feel like we vacillate between putting out these products for kind of gathering data on people and then maybe not doing much with the data or kind of leaking the data through security flaws, and then subscriptions. And it's really confusing and hard for the customer. So it's become harder for me to recommend that people buy this stuff because it doesn't feel like the value is there for them in a lot of cases. It feels like they're either going to become the product or they're going to regret it because it's going to fail after, a year or two when the company goes out of business.
And new business models really never came about. We expected those. And I mean, we've kind of we went from free to everything back to being subscription. Not everything, but it's moving that direction. So that's a disappointment, I think, in the last decade as well.
Yeah, and I really thought we'd be farther in terms of integrating all of these devices into a cohesive whole. And we'll talk about where we want the smart home to go next as when we answer our voicemail. But, for me, it's just become harder to get excited about some of the same old stuff. I feel like it's probably like a smartphone reporter, maybe, I don't know, a decade ago when smartphones stopped being really interesting.
It's funny you say that because when I came to GigaOM in 2008, and even a few years prior, I was covering mobile technology, specifically smartphones. And that was the perfect time. And when we started up the podcast here, or you took it away from GigaOM or started it up again, it was a good time, I thought. But now I would not want to be in the smart home review space where I was, and that's why I stopped doing that, 2015. And moved on to Chromebooks and helping here with IoT stuff. So I am right there with you. I mean, I lost track of how many times we would talk before the show and be like, bleh, we're just not feeling it. What happened to this? What happened to that? And yeah.
And there are things I am feeling. I am really still very optimistic. I feel like we've made some good progress in terms of security. I feel like Matter may be a disappointment today. It may continue to be a disappointment, but it really did enshrine some security values that I think are important. I think we still need federal privacy legislation and privacy laws. That's going to help a lot with some of the new stuff we're bringing out and kind of mitigating some of the potential harms to consumers as they get stuff from their insurer. So
it's funny you mention that because now is the answer to the question, where is Stacey going?
Yeah. So this isn't a full-time job. This is a contract kind of work, short-term contract. I'm consulting with Consumer Reports as an IoT expert for some of the cybersecurity labeling stuff that they're doing. So I'll be working on that. And I hope to hear from y'all. Like, if you have crazy ideas about security, about privacy, if you see new technology that's interesting, I want to hear from you about it. Not just because of my work with Consumer Reports, but I am thinking about what I want to do beyond that. And right now, I don't know. I'm looking for the next spark that really excites me. And so that's what I'm doing next. Kevin, what are you doing?
Oh, where am I going? I'm just going away.
Kevin is fading into the sunset.
I am just going away. I have no place to go. But that's not for a lack of trying, because obviously this was not news to me. Stacy, as I said many times before, has always been very transparent with me for as long as I've worked with her, which is fantastic and much appreciated. So I've known for as long as this decision has been made. So I actually have been job hunting. I am not job hunting in the IoT space. I know some folks have reached out to me via the podcast and email, but those IoT type things are just not what I want to be doing, partially for the reasons that we kind of said we're not going to be doing the podcast anymore.
It's hard to say, I'm just not that excited about IoT, and then rush to take a job.
It's not you, it's me. That's what I just keep saying, you know? So I will be continuing to create content for the aboutchromebooks.com site that I started in 2018, which ironically I started on April 1st that year, April Fool's Day, because I just had extra free time because I wasn't working. I left Google in 2017 and I was a consultant for Stacy, not full time. So I had time. And that's actually blossomed into a decent readership, but unfortunately ad rates are really, really bad, really bad. So I do some other consulting on the side, nothing recent. I've actually been driving Uber for a couple of weeks, almost 6 weeks now, just to build up some extra income while I search for jobs. So types of jobs that I'm looking for in case anybody has any potential leads. I'm basically looking at technical documentation for developers and users. I've been, as people probably know, learning about web technologies and so on for the past several years. Do I have extensive development and technical writing experience? I'd say no, but I have proven that I can do it. So for what that's worth, yeah, I mean, that's all I'm doing right now.
Okay, so reach out to Kevin if you have anything that seems promising. Or I suppose if you're ever in his neighborhood, you can get an Uber and see if you... I'm like, you would be the best driver. Like, you're socially aware and you have interesting things to talk about if someone does want to talk. So
I am enjoying the heck out of that. It's not a full-time job, obviously. I only do it a couple hours a day for whatever days during the week I do it. But I love it. And most Uber drivers only get like 1 in 7 or 1 in 8 riders giving a tip, which boggles my mind. But I'm at like 60%. And I think a lot of it is what you just said. Talking tech, talking whatever, listening to whatever they got going on that they want to share and offering my temporary dad advice. I really enjoy interacting with people. So, it's good to get out of the house.
That's a good job for you. Kevin Tofolk, temporary dad. You are such a mentor to young people. I know in your computer science programs, you've always done that. And you really...
I wish there was like a computer science student mentor position, like at every college. I mean, it does not even computer science. It should be there for every, people. I mean, people who are passionate about that industry, that discipline, I think can go a long way, especially if they got industry experience in that discipline to share with the younger generation. It is so fulfilling, but there is no such position that I can find. Yeah.
All right. And thank you also for everyone. I know that we've been getting lots of emails of people saying nice things to us. And thank you. Thank you for your time, your attention. We appreciate you. We appreciate our sponsors. I appreciate everybody who's come on the show as a guest. I mean, y'all are freaking awesome. And the biggest question we get is, what do I listen to next? And y'all aren't going to love it. I don't have I don't know. I mean, every show is different. And because Kevin and I have such hugely wide interests, from industrial to weird wireless tech to reviewing smart home gadgets to me and my love of business. And I have not found one show that does that. Sorry.
Yeah.
But we have some good resources, and we'll link this in the show notes too, so you have it. But I know y'all think you're listening to the IoT podcast, but you're really listening to the Internet of Things podcast. And there is a podcast called the IoT podcast. And the host, Tom White, is a British man who talks to a huge array of guests. So they could be in the smart home. They could be in industrial. He's got shows on digital twins. He's got shows on Snap AV. He's got shows on broadband. I'm going to tell you that he doesn't cover like the news segments, but his guests, they can be pretty good. It is maybe a little less journalistic. It kind of feels very sweet and easy, but some of my guests I've been sweet and easy with too, so I can't really complain.
That's not necessarily a problem, I don't think. I mean, if a topic is very approachable, fun, and provides good information, to me, that's perfectly fine. So
yeah, and he works for an IoT kind of dev shop, so you know, just be aware that there's not like a super journalistic angle. The other one that I actually been on it, and I think it's a really informative show about the topics they cover, is the Mr. Beacon podcast. This is actually produced by the marketing manager for Wiliot. But because it is produced by Wiliot, like they have a lot of technical expertise and a lot of really interesting guests. You do have to realize that you're getting Wiliot's perspective, as it were.
Yeah.
But their focus, if you recall, is kind of ambient IoT. So they make a Bluetooth chip that has computing and everything. And they're working now with like wireless charging for electronic shelf labels. We've had them on our show, but they have in their area really great guests that are very technically savvy. So I really recommend that. Check it out. Some of their recent episodes are like ambient IoT using backscatter and Wi-Fi, but also things like the Internet of Packaging with WestRock, which is probably a customer of theirs, connecting food supply chains with farm to plate. So it's pretty good. Kevin, do you have one or?
So I don't listen to podcasts, as Stacey will attest. She's nodding her head. So I have like 3 places to consider if people are not already going to for information. I know 2 of them, which are actually sort of the same, maybe a little controversial, but I'd still say give them a chance. Those are 2 Reddit or subreddits. And I understand not everybody likes Reddit, and it can be a tough audience to interact with. But there is a ton of good information there. You don't have to interact with people. You can just read through posts. And the 2 subreddits that I often go to are the home automation subreddit and the smart home subreddit. And
me too.
Do you really?
Yes.
There you go. Okay. I don't feel so bad now. I feel a little bit more confident in what I'm recommending. So I think those are good places to bookmark and just kind of keep track of. And there's a lot of good blogs out there. No question, people are probably reading The Ambient, checking out JP Tuohy's coverage on The Verge and things like that. TechHive is one that I would recommend that I don't know if it is very prominently read by our audience. So you'll get reviews there and how-tos and whatnot. It's a pretty good community over there, very positive and helpful. So those are like 3 things or 3 places that I would consider looking for additional information in this space.
Nice. And I also have JP Tuohy over, Jen Tuohy over at The Verge. And she is actually my guest this week because I wanted to send for y'all in the smart home. If you're not following Jen, you really should. She's been doing this as long as we have and is just as smart and just as funny, actually probably funnier, and sounds smarter because she has a British accent. So that automatically makes her smarter than all of us. But she is our guest this week. So stay tuned. You'll get a sneak peek of what it's like to hang out and read her stuff, listen to her. She's great. And another industrial IoT option is the Industrial IoT Consortium. I think it's every quarter they do the Journal of Innovation. And this is a peer-reviewed deep dive into crazy cool industrial IoT issues in tech. So their January edition had like a whole section on the machine economy and another article on the role of 5G. This is freely available to people. I don't know how often it comes out, but it's super nerdy, but it's really good. The most recent one came out in April, so there's going to be a new one soon. That one was all about sustainability. So they have a whole thing on blockchain, prediction and prevention of wildfires. It's just a really good deep dive into industrial issues. So if you're not going there. And then when we think about things like design and AI, I subscribe to a newsletter by an entrepreneur in Europe who does the ThingsCon. And the newsletter is called Target is New. And you're not going to find it unless you put Target is New in quotes in your search and then do newsletter. But you can also go to targetisnew.com, and it's a great newsletter. Like, I don't even know how to describe it because it's just all kinds of stuff. It's design. It's Xander Smit, who is the design director at Structural and the founder of Cities of Things. So that's who's doing it. You get stuff on like cars, you get stuff on ethics, you get stuff on AI. It's super fun. So those are some of the resources that I use on a daily basis. I do go to a lot of industry sites. Like I follow a lot of blogs from like Machine Metrics and companies like that. And I try to keep abreast on like any chip news. So I follow EE Times, which is a semiconductor or electronic engineering magazine. But those are probably the ones that I tend to pull from the most when I'm like pulling news and that sort of thing. And hopefully you'll find some things that scratch your itch. Oh, and I forgot about I'm so sorry, y'all. There are tons of bloggers and people who follow specific industries. So there's Smart Things Beat, who only does the Smart Things infrastructure, or primarily does that. There's folks who only do Home Assistant. So there's a lot of those options out there as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a bunch of other sources. I mean, some of these we use to follow along for news just to talk about each week, for example. So it's not like we're just throwing random sources out there that like, hey, you might find more stuff here. We've actually found good, useful information at these resources. So hopefully that helps.
Yay. Okay, so that really concludes the goodbye section of the podcast. We have had so much fun with you.
More fun than you people even know. And I'm just going to say it. I joked around with Stacy before we recorded this a couple weeks ago. Actually, I talked about this. I'm like, man, I have 6.5 hours of recorded bloopers from all the shows. We should share those. And she's like, oh my God, do you? Well, I was joking. I don't. But I probably could have. And we started reminiscing about all the silly voices that I would make or things happening like she has a bird outside that bangs on her window while we're recording. And we would just laugh. And I cannot tell you all how much fun this has been. Just not just because of those times, but also because of those times. And I really wish I had recorded some of those.
Me too. Although then we would have to edit it into a bloopers episode.
I know.
But yeah. And I mean, Kevin and I have worked together since 2008. So this is the first time that, so I'm also saying goodbye not really goodbye because we'll still talk, but
there was a year we did not work together from 2015 to 2016 ish or so.
That's not true. We did the podcast while I was at Fortune. You don't remember that?
I've been doing this so long, I can't remember.
Kevin's like,
oh my goodness.
And you know what's even worse? You did it for free because we didn't sell
That's
ads.
Not worse. That's better for you.
Well, no, like my goal was the second I left and could actually make money on the podcast was to pay.
I know.
But yeah,
I know.
Kevin did this wow. Thanks, Kevin.
No, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed every bit of it.
So yeah, but we're not leaving you just yet because we have to announce a voicemail winner. And I'm not going to give you the phone number for the Internet of Things podcast hotline because
it's not going to work.
It won't work anymore. We're shutting that sucker down. But we've had hundreds of calls. It helps us keep a pulse on what matters in the industry. So thank you for calling in with your questions. But before we go, I have to tell you our winner. The August winner is Scott, and I will be reaching out to you to get your address to send you the stuff, the Philips Hue stuff. Woo! So congratulations.
Can I just say one thing about all those prizes?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if people realize this. Stacy buys them.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
not like handed down from companies saying, here's some stuff to give away. And I think that's awesome because so many people in what we do get sponsors to give stuff away and all that. But Stacy never wanted to do that. She always wanted to just say, hey, I'm giving back to the community. Let's do this. And I think that's great.
Thank you. Occasionally we would have someone who, like, I think we gave away some Schlage locks when they sponsored. But for the most part, I'm just trying to think. But yeah, for the most part, I do. I buy them, or sometimes, like, I think I just recently offered a Keurig smart coffee machine because I had one that I had tested. But we basically always tell you where we get it from.
But by and large, most of them came out of Stacy's pocket. And I think people should understand that.
Okay. Well, there you go. Yeah, I'm sending this to you, Scott. So congratulations. And this last voicemail, I love it. I don't know who you are. You didn't leave a name or where you're from, but thank you for letting us end on a high note. So let's hear this voicemail.
Hey, so I just wanted to say I'm a big fan of the show and I'm very sad to see it end. I just wanted to thank you both for the years of entertainment and information. And I have a kind of a two-part question. So what feature or set of features would you want or need where you would consider your smart home journey kind of complete? Like, when does it end, I guess, for you two personally? And the second part of my question is, as an engineer in this space myself, what advice can you provide for future direction? Like, where do you think we should be focusing on next to push the industry forward? And again, thank you both so much.
What a perfect voicemail for the final show. What a perfect one.
That's why we picked it. I'll just be fully transparent.
Well, it is. But there were a lot of good voicemails that not just saying, I'm going to miss you guys, blah, blah, blah. It was, I'll miss you guys, blah, blah, blah. And, if here's a question. We got a bunch of good ones, but this just sums it up. I love it.
So where's your smart home going to end? What does it look like in your vision?
This goes back to the top of the show, why I'm not too enthused about moving forward anymore, and partly why we're not doing this. It's right where we were 10 years ago. I wanted two things, and I really still don't have them. And those two things are personal presence detection, meaning not just somebody is here in this room or whatever, but I am in this room versus my wife or my kid. And two, we're just starting to see with the whole implementation of OpenAI, the potential for a truly smart home. We are not there yet. I've wanted this. Stacy has stopped me from writing the same "Where's my smart home" post for the last 4 years because I wrote it every year for the prior 6.
I let you do it like once a year, but beyond that, it's just kicking the dead horse.
But isn't it? It's just telling that I wanted to write that post every single year we've done this because that's my vision. That's what I wanted. I wanted a home that can interpret the data and see what I might want next and take care of things for me that I don't even have to think if it's taken care of anymore. It's just, we're not there. Again, maybe we're seeing the start of this with AI, but those are the two things that I would say my smart home journey would be more complete. And just to put a pin in what I'm doing with my smart home, I'm taking out I'm going to take out everything and I'm going to start from scratch because I still have a lot of test devices. I got multiple networks, 7-thread networks. I have boxes of things that I just either A, don't provide enough value, or B, don't connect with what I want. So I'm going back and resetting everything up. It will be a home assistant based system. Will I keep HomeKit as well? Because they can coexist. I may, just because it's still a nice user interface and I like generally what Apple has done. But other than that, I think I'm done. I'm done.
Okay. So like Kevin, I would like person detection at the person level. And like Kevin, I think I'll call it a closed loop smart home, where sensors are gathering the data. You've got your software and algorithms that run locally that then develop an insight based on that data. And then you have a set of rules and historical data that informs actions, and the home will be able to take those actions on your behalf. We're not there yet. I also, from my perspective, I would like the smart home to do that. And I want it to do it in an interoperable manner. And I want to pay for an OS type service that brings it all together. And I'm okay paying a subscription fee for that because it's important for me to have that run locally and for that data to be protected. There is a potential, if you develop this kind of closed loop smart home with that level of granular understanding about each person in it, that you get to this place where it becomes coercive and companies can really optimize their suggestions and insights to you or your home to get you to do things that maybe you don't want to do. Maybe it's spend more money on a certain kind of breakfast cereal. Maybe it is to get you to spend an additional hour watching television when maybe you should have been doing something else. It is those kind of things. I don't trust the industry as it stands now to deliver the closed loop smart home in a responsible and ethical manner. So that's what I'm hoping for, but I'm hoping that I can pay for it in a way that allows it to actually work for me and not for the companies.
It's funny that you say that because your first point is really what I'm going at here, the smart home operating system, that provides what you followed up with. How many times have we been promised that? How many times have we seen companies start those and not deliver? Or how many times have we seen companies start those and never even roll something out, like the ambient OS from Andy Rubin's group,
Oh, yeah. Well, you could say, I think Amazon was working there with Madam A, but they also lost a lot of money doing that and couldn't figure out how to make it work. And then I do think there's, I just talked to a company called Sendal who is actually building that level of interoperability, taking existing gear and then building insights around occupancy. And they're focused on energy savings and clean air. And their customers are actually home builders. So you'll buy a home with this kind of infrastructure in it. And they're actually delivering real savings on energy bills. And so I think there's some options here. I think it's going to be more infrastructure related. And that's fine by me. Some of this stuff does feel like a gimmick. And I think there are individual devices like my June oven, that I think it doesn't have to exist as part of a greater smart home. It's just a device that's smarter and provides something that I value. And maybe my video doorbell is part of that, one of those types of devices. And it doesn't need to talk to everything else. I don't know. I would like it to be part of a security system that does talk intelligently to other security systems. But right now, I don't trust the way it's going about it. So
this is not part of the question. We've pretty much answered the question, I think.
No, we haven't.
But no, we haven't?
No, we haven't. We haven't answered part 2, which is advice for the future directions to push the industry forward.
Okay, well, I have a part 3. Let's not forget that.
Okay. So, well, do you want to do your part 3? Do your part 3 right now.
What is your favorite smart home device?
Okay.
I'm putting her on the spot here.
Yeah, I think it's the June oven.
That's why I asked.
There's a reason I refer back, because it fits so many, when you think of, not as part of a cohesive smart home, but as an individual device, this was just so well done. And it still works today for me. And yeah, I love it.
And I bring up the question because you mentioned June oven in the answer to your, the previous part. And it's the same answer for me. And for the same reasons, it's the most used device in our home by everybody here. And it's changed the way we cook. And it's been such a positive experience, I'm not shilling it. I'm not saying everybody should go get one, but I'm just saying for us, it has been the best purchase ever.
If it hadn't been that, and if I didn't work from home, I actually think the Nest or the Ecobee thermostat would be pretty high up there because it's another device that has delivered seamlessly delivered intelligence in a way that I don't have to think about or touch. But for me, it's not a game changer simply because I don't leave the house every day, right? So I don't see the savings that it promises simply because, I need AC all the time.
I think most people would say from a return on investment / value perspective, the good smart thermostats definitely fit in that category. So I totally understand where you're coming from.
Yeah. So going back to 2, because this is the last show, we can go out of order. That's fine. Advice for for the future directions to push the industry forward. Kevin, I know you're all about presence. Any other things?
Well, I mean, not to beat a dead horse, but compatibility, openness, simplicity from an end user standpoint, providing end users a true understanding of what devices do, are capable of, what they do with the data, et cetera. And as much, provide that information in advance as much as possible. I mean, I don't think there's any surprises in what I'm saying. Yes, they're kind of obvious, but we're still talking about them 10 years later. So that's because the problems are not solved.
So I'm going to go with two very relevant things that I think the industry could do today that would be just great from a consumer perspective. 1, put an expiration date on your device. Like I talk about planning for failure. This is part of that planning for failure. It's this idea that as a developer, and I know why you don't want to do it. I get why manufacturers are not excited about this. But just like, when you have an Android or an Apple phone, they now tell you you're going to get security updates for 3 years on this thing. I want to know what the end of life or the obsolescence period is for my devices. And I want that printed on a box when I buy it. So, when I bought my Arlo cameras back in, I think it was 2018, 2019. When I bought those, it would have been great to know they were going to kill that particular camera in 2023. Now, they didn't tell me that, and then everybody freaked out, and so then they extended it a little bit longer. But the idea here is I don't want to be caught off guard by these things because my cameras still work, right? It would suck if they just died because the company was like, I don't want to support it anymore. So that's 1, expiration date on devices. And 2 is transparency about the sensors and the data that you're collecting and what you do with it. People don't trust the makers of these equipment, and they probably shouldn't. So I think it's really important that you share that information easily with people. And when it changes, you let them know. So that's the little stuff. Big picture, I think people in the industry should be working on how to share information in different networks. So if I have a smart home network that knows what's happening in my house, maybe I also have like a personal health or a medical network, which might be made up of information my doctor has about me, my wearables. Maybe it's an activity tracker, but maybe it's something fancy like, EKG monitoring. We need to have that network and that data able to communicate and share their data in a good format with the house when necessary and vice versa. But we need to also make sure we keep that data separate. So I'm trying to think about how we share data between these different networks because I think they should be separate networks. And, another network might be your employer's network, and you enter into that network when you go into the office, but you don't want to have that network talking to your home. Your boss doesn't need to know that about you, right? So that's one thing I'm thinking about. 2 is scale. How do we scale this? 3, power. How do we power this? Energy harvesting, over-the-air charging, those are coming a long way. I'm really excited about it. And then how do we build security into this in a way that it is ongoing and convenient for everyone? And then if we're thinking about things like digital twins, I'm like, y'all, we got to have some sort of data formats for this because nobody wants to set up a digital twin like in one program and then have to move it to another program. That's too much. So there's a million of these that I think about, but that'll do for now.
You could have like a year's worth of podcasts on all of that.
I could. Every week I could come up with a new thing that I'd like for us to focus on. So thank you for that question.
You saved all those till episode 500. I can't believe it.
Or episode 437, whichever. Mm-hmm. So y'all, thank you for such a great journey. Kevin, thank you. For all of our sponsors, thank you. And yeah, other than extreme gratitude, I am so glad to have spent this time with y'all, and I'm grateful to be closing on a high note. Should I sing a high note?
Oh, yeah. We'll add it to the blooper reel.
There we go. All right. Kevin, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's the end of an era, Never even thought about when this was going to happen, and here it is. And I can only echo your sentiments back at you and the listeners, all the great people who reach out to us. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And that concludes the final news section, which wasn't about news, but stay tuned because I'm talking to Jen Toohey from The Verge, who I highly recommend you follow. We're going to be talking about the smart home matter. She's got some hints for what's coming up next in Matter. And thank you. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and today's guest is Jennifer Patterson Toohey, who is a smart home reviewer at The Verge. Hello, Jen. How are you today?
Hi, Stacey. I am doing very well, and I'm very pleased to be here, although it's slightly sad.
Yes. So I told you guys that I am stepping back from doing the Internet of Things podcast and the newsletter. And so I wanted to introduce you to some of my favorite writers and people that I really respect and think of as awesome and knowledgeable about various different areas that I cover. And Jen is, bar none, I think the best generalized smart home reporter out there. You've been doing this. I mean, I knew you at Dwell 10 years. How long have you been doing this? Am I making that up?
No. Yeah, 10 years actually. I think my first byline in the smart home was probably 2013, and we're in 2023 now. So yeah, it's been a decade. And I've been a journalist a fair bit longer than that. Won't go into decades there. But yes, it's been a while. I started out actually with the Wirecutter and Dwell magazine, and I've written for a number of different publications, BBC and the Ambient website, and a few others, and have been doing this for a long time now at The Verge, and really been enjoying following the ever-changing and evolving smart home space along with you. And you and Kevin have been my guides along the way too. So
yeah, we basically started on this. I mean, Kevin and I started doing this I think I reviewed the Wemo Smart Plug in 2012, and I used it. It was late in the year because I plugged in my Christmas tree and used it to control the lights. And everyone was like, why would you want to remotely control?
Wow, so exciting.
And I was like,
wow, so exciting. Yes, and it is. I mean, the smart home space always has lots of great, delightful surprises, then also some not so delightful surprises. So always something good to write about, though.
Yes. So let's talk about I'm a little burnt out on the smart home. I feel like I've seen lots of things come and go. I feel like we're coming around again to the just create a hub and DIY it yourself. So we've got all these the Homey Pro, the Hoobs Pro, we've got Home Assistant. We've got all of these home DIY platforms coming back around, and the established players, I feel like they're kind of a little stagnant, and I feel like they went all in on Matter, and I'm not sure where we're going there. So that's kind of my 50,000 foot view take of the smart home today. But I would love your take. Where do you think we're at with the overall smart home?
You know, it's interesting that you say that about the hubs and sort of coming back. And I was actually just saying this the other day. I said, I feel like we're actually at the return of the hub, even though Matter was kind of designed to get rid, or they said was designed to get rid of the hub. But it does feel like now to solve the problem of the solution to the problems of the smart home, we've gone back to the original solution, which was a hub that has all the radios in so that everything works with everything. Because as much as I hope that this is not the case, there is the famous comic that, we have 10 competing standards in the smart home and nothing works. Let's create this one that will fix it all. And then the solution ends up being we have 11 competing standards in the smart home. And it almost feels like there are companies out there that are like, okay, this is what we see is going to happen. So we're going to have our hub that does everything. And when the smart home started, or when I got involved with the current shape of the smart home, because yes, I know the smart home goes back way into the 80s and even earlier, but the current consumer DIY smart home, it was Wink and SmartThings and Revolve and a few others. And we were always searching for that one hub that had all the radios, because there was never that. And now we've actually, I guess it was just launched a few weeks ago, the Homey Pro, I think, is the first one I've seen that really does have everything in it. And then you've got Home Assistant and Hoobs, and there are all these options, but these are not solutions for the smart home that we ultimately need. And to answer your question, what is the sort of overview, the state of the smart home today? We're in this flux. We're in this crevice between the DIY, tinkerer, early adopter smart home and the smart home of the future that most people will find using some form of in their homes within the next decade. And, I don't think that the ultimate, everything works together, your lights turn on when you walk in the room, your thermostat adjusts, that perfect smart home is still a long way away. But the solutions that the smart home provides to individual problems within the home are beneficial. And those are the areas I think that we see the growth. And that's why robot vacuums are so popular. That's why video doorbells are so popular. And I have hope that Matter will help us bring all that together. I just don't think it's going to do it as quickly as anyone was hoping.
On that note, let's talk about where Matter is. Because I was a huge champion of Matter. I was really excited. I was like, ooh, all the people are involved. People were everyone told me the standards comic, yes. And we might be there. But how do you feel about the rollout? Are you disappointed like I am?
Yeah. I do still have hope. I may be being very optimistic, but I think, what else are we going to do? I don't see another industry-wide collaboration coming along and fixing things. I feel like this is our best hope. And I do believe that the basic infrastructure is there. I believe that the companies are working to make this happen, and the big platforms that are needed to move it forward are working on it. I just think everyone involved was perhaps too ambitious about its early benefits. And this is ultimately, and to be fair to say, the CSA early on at the launch, for example, they did say Matter is a solution for the long term. It's not necessarily going to fix our smart homes today, but it is going to make the smart home easier for everyone else to use. So the early adopters are probably a little bit going to be are still going to be frustrated with Matter for a while. But I do believe there will come a time within the next year or so where it is actually possible to go and buy a device that has a Matter logo on it, just plug it in, and it will work, as has been promised. But it's basic. Matter is about basic infrastructure. It really is the plumbing of the smart home. It's not the fun stuff, which is the stuff that I think gets people like us and your listeners more excited about the smart home, which is a shame that we're not there yet. Although I have, speaking to the people at CSA, some of that fun stuff is coming, like dynamic lighting. They are going to be adding that sooner rather than later. I think this is one of the big challenges of Matter, though, is it's an organization, a standards organization with many voices. And I think they're finding making progress is a lot harder than they had hoped.
Yeah, that's like that whole democracy problem. You got to listen to everybody.
Yes. Who needs democracy in the smart home?
Exactly. So you've mentioned this distinction between DIYers, mainstream users. You talk about fun applications and kind of the mainstream applications. So let's talk about what the mainstream user, what do they want from their smart home?
So this is the key, I think, and this is where I think Matter is going to really help. I don't think the mainstream user wants a smart home. I think the mainstream user just wants a better home, right? I don't think they're interested in making everything work together from day one, but I do think they're interested in solutions to common problems in their home, such as high energy bills, so smart thermostat, missing people knocking at the door or missing packages, so doorbell, video doorbell. And ultimately, all of those parts and pieces can come together to create a home that is actually helpful. Just like our cars have become so much more technologically advanced and can basically do everything for us other than, well, even turn the wheel eventually, depending on which state you live in. I think our homes are moving that way too. And it's not really going to be driven by the consumer's buying choices in Home Depot or on Amazon. I think ultimately it's going to be driven by our home's infrastructure, both when we build our homes, when we remodel our homes, when we add new HVAC systems, when we do new wiring or new plumbing. Insurance companies are going to give us breaks if we add connected water valves. Those smoke alarms that are connected are going to give us breaks on our insurance. I think there's going to be sort of almost a societal push towards the connected home, which then brings up problems that you have rightly highlighted many times on your show about the concern about when these companies have access to our data and will they stop insuring us because our smoke alarm has been unplugged. And so there's concerns there, but you can also see the kind of the greater good as well in terms of reducing energy use, which is going to be a huge part of the smart home going forward, and aging in place, which I think is ultimately one of the best goals for any smart home, because when you make your home today work well and support you, it means it's going to help you stay in that home for longer, and which ultimately, looking altruistically, reduces the pressure on society to care for you in hospitals or care homes, or we've got a problem facing our society as boomers age and our population grows, where we don't have space for everyone. And the longer you can stay in your home and stay safely and healthily in your home, the better it is for everyone. So those are sort of long-term goals that I think the smart home can really help with.
Yeah. And I think about breaking it down into the smart home today provides a lot of information, and sometimes it can take action. But the smart home that hopefully we're building, especially around these services like smart energy and aging in place, we needed to gather the information about what's going on in this home. We need it to make some sort of insight, and then we need it to also take action. And I feel like many of our gadgets and maybe some of the infrastructure that we're putting in to gather that information is helpful, and Matter will join a lot of those things together. The insights, I think, are going to be things that come from the big companies and the algorithms that they build. And then I feel like we're so far away from things in your house taking action that, maybe that will never happen. I don't know.
Oh, I totally agree with you on that taking action point. And as I wrote a piece a few weeks ago about my thermostat problem, where I wish it had been able to take more action for me when I came back from a vacation and to a big issue with my thermostat. And it raises issues, but also if you can build the trust, which is a big part of the smart home, the ability for your home to be proactive and fix problems will be a huge selling point. I think that is ultimately where we need to get. Right now, the smart home is all notifications, lots of notifications, more notifications than you could possibly want most of the time, but very little action. So we need to get to a point where first we can streamline notifications because it's all too easy to just ignore them because of the overload. And this is somewhere where AI, I think, could be very helpful in the smart home. Actions are going to require, I believe, services. And, I think things like home monitoring services will expand from security in the traditional sense to also security of your home's infrastructure. So, for example, in my issue, when my thermostat had a problem, if I had a home security system, perhaps they're also connected to an HVAC company and they can see what's going on and send someone. But ultimately, that's still people fixing your home, not the smart home fixing your home. But that's part of the benefit, I think, of being connected, our homes being connected. And I think that is going to be a good use case.
And this is a good point, because I feel like we got very excited about the smart home and we thought of all of these devices as gadgets and this idea that we'd buy all these gadgets and they'd all somehow work and become infrastructure in our homes. But what we've actually found is we need new construction, like all of the KB Homes or DR Horton that are putting in, they're like, oh, we're going to make Wi-Fi going to be a core part of your home. We're going to have smart door locks or smart light switches to be just a core part of your home that's installed at the beginning, right? So that level of infrastructure. I thought I would be buying my smart home, but really what I'm going to be doing is relying on a network of distributors, maybe my insurance. Maybe I won't even get a smart home unless I do a renovation or buy a new home. And that feels a little disheartening from what I thought we'd be at, I guess.
Yeah, well, and as you know, only 10% of, I believe that's the right stat, of homes in North America and new builds. That's not a very large infrastructure. Most people in this country live in old homes. Retrofitting is problematic and difficult for a lot of these larger projects like electricity and plumbing. And also the big sort of unknown and really unexplored in the smart home is the multi-family dwelling units and renters, and there's so little that's sort of been done for them. It's starting, but there has been so little to date. Although a lot of that is also new build, and we are seeing smart infrastructure being put into new, multifamily units. But still, that's a long way away. But I agree that this is looking at the smart home in the future. Ultimately, that's where I'd love to see it. I don't think that it necessarily precludes us enjoying some of the gadgets that we have today. I do think there are, still lots of benefits you can find with the smart home today. I just think that ultimate cohesive experience is what we're still a long way from achieving. Although, it can be done with a bit of time, effort, blood, sweat and tears, and a really good Wi-Fi network if you choose one platform. But yeah, it feels limiting still. And there are frustrations that you come across, things that you want to do and that you can't. And that's disheartening for sure.
Now let's just get a little bit more about you, because your job is to review smart home gear. And I think The Verge actually did a piece for their Smart Home Week, and they had all of these other reporters talking about what was in their home. And I was like, well, what the heck is in Jen's home?
I got asked that a few times.
Yeah. And so do you want to tell us what's in your home? Are you going to punt on this one?
So I'll give you the answer I gave most people that asked me was, I like to think of myself like a restaurant reviewer. I never reveal my favorite restaurant. But because, ultimately I don't have one platform that I just run my home on. I do probably have one I would choose if I could. But as we mentioned, I started doing this. Actually, I think my first device was the Wink Hub in 2010. Before I was even writing about things, I installed things. And I have a Frankenstein house. I have gone through so many iterations of devices since I moved into this house, which I've been in for over 10 years. And that I am running all 5 platforms currently. But I probably default mostly to a combination of Apple Home and Amazon Alexa, because I really like the responsiveness of an Apple HomeKit experience. It's the easiest to manage because it's very straightforward and it doesn't have a lot of weird, confusing elements like Amazon's Alexa platform does. Sorry, I'm going to stop saying the A word.
We call her Madam A.
Madam A. But I like Apple's approach, and I am an iPhone user. But what I love about Madam A is the innovation there. I find that Madam A is actually a lot more proactive and useful. Whereas I find Apple Home is great for the base. So I have my routines and my sort of scenes and my basics running smoothly with Apple Home. And then for the kind of more fun stuff or more innovative things like hunches or setting up special scenes for like holidays, then I will default to using Madame A. I also use Madame A for my voice assistant because I find it a little bit more, it's a little smarter than Apple's version, much more likely to give me the right answers, though I often want to stop when I get too many by the ways, which does frustrate me, especially once I think in the middle of very late at night, I was, putting my daughter to bed and we asked it to play sleep sounds and responded with offering to upsell me to premium sleep sounds. By the way, did you know? So those kind of things do make me want to throw Echoes out the window. But I would like to throw in a sort of shout out for Google Home, because I have been wanting to use Google Home as my platform for a long time because I really like Nest hardware. I think the Nest doorbell and the Nest cameras, outdoor cameras, indoor cameras, are some of the best in class in terms of what they offer feature-wise, privacy-wise, and hardware-wise, although they are also quite expensive. But the Google Home app experience and the Google Smart Display experience has been very subpar for a while, until the recent redesign of the Home app, but it's still just not there. But it's one to watch. I feel like it's the one that could, if Google sticks with it, which is a big if, really have the best experience, the best combination of what I like about Apple Home and what I like about Amazon Alexa. And I've used SmartThings and a Home Assistant and a number of other platforms. So that was a long-winded answer.
No, but that's good, and that gives a lot of perspective. I think on both, there are so many options, and it can be hard to figure out. And if you just don't want to manage it, like when people are like, "Oh, I've got my mom wants some smart light bulbs. I want to put that up for her. They use an iPhone." I'm like, they're not tech savvy. I'm like, dude, HomeKit all the way. Just, it's going to be easy. It's going to work. It's not going to cause problems. If you're a little bit more adventurous, I too I'm like, Amazon's got some crazy stuff, but let me tell you, Madame A is really driving that monetization plan, and it can be hard. All right. So where do you think we're heading? I feel a little down on things. I feel like the monetization piece has not been well thought out. So we're getting a lot more subscriptions. We're getting beloved devices that might be going out of business. We're getting things like, by the way, confusion about whether Google is going to stick around. I'm a Google Home user mostly, and I have this issue. I'm like, oh, please don't leave. So where do you think we're heading?
Yeah, I think subscriptions are something that we are just going to have to get used to living with. Because, and I know it's frustrating, but every time you see a company that touts not having, you don't have to pay for a subscription, or if you have concerns around sort of privacy or data, if you're not paying for something, you're the product. So I feel like subscriptions will help with that concern around the smart home, where we've got from advertising, from data, from, by the way, that's all coming at us because these companies have to make money. And I don't think it's unrealistic for these companies to expect to make money. The smart home is not free. Our homes are not free. We pay a lot of money for everything we put into our homes. But when you buy a device and then have to pay a subscription for it, generally that subscription is adding significant value over the basic device that you bought prior to there being a smart home version, or is giving you value that you wouldn't have otherwise. And I just feel like it's hard. You have to pick and choose. You can't have everything in your house, or you would be spending a fortune on subscriptions. But what I see for the future here is what we've seen with cord cutting. I see bundling. I think we're going to have to pick what we want to spend our money on for our homes. But like I mentioned earlier about, the home security system, I think a home security system in the future will also cover your home camera system, and it may also cover flood and leak protection, I think you'll be paying perhaps one subscription to one company, which, does give you, I would worry about being sort of stuck in a walled garden there, but this is where Matter would come in. Hopefully it would be quite easy to switch over your devices to a different company if you wanted to. But ultimately, I don't think it's realistic to believe that the smart home is going to be subscription free. We've been burnt too many times by companies that it seemed like they had a great product. It cost a lot of money up front, but you're like, oh, but that's fine. I don't have to pay monthly. 2 years later, it's gone. And now you have a very expensive paperweight.
Jen, thank you so much for coming on the show this week. I encourage everybody out there to go follow Jen at The Verge. She is just a stellar reporter, really cares about this, does the work, knows what she's talking about. Jen, where can they find you?
Yep, you can find me on theverge.com, or you can follow me on the X site, formerly known as Twitter, at JP2E. I'm also on the Threads, all those places at JP2E, and theverge.com is the best place, though. That's where everything I write will show up. All right, well, that brings us to the end. I can't tell you to go to the newsletter. I can't tell you to stay tuned, but thank you for a wonderful ride with the Internet of Things podcast.